I'm a clinical psychologist, and I mostly work with neurodivergent um, teens, but I also see young kids and adults, and I provide individual therapy. I really love what I do. And the truth is that, just like you advocate for, I really believe in following your passion. And so now I am also writing my debut book because that is my second passion, writing.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And people are saying, from around the world are saying, I know British Columbia, where is Prince George? Well, British Columbia is a very, very big province, very beautiful actually. Most people know where Vancouver is. We are 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our European friends, 800 kilometers. And that is in the center of British Columbia, exactly, northwest, or south to east and north to west, so right in the middle. So today we have a very, very special guest. Her name is Dr. Gilly, Kahn, and she has an amazing resume. The Dr. Kahn is a clinical psychologist, ADHD advocate, a writer, an educator, and a mother. She provides individual group therapy in the services in the Atlanta region to children, teens, and adults, most of who are microdivergent or SCS. Lillian, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here, John.
You have such an amazing background. Can you share with our guests around the world here? And it's so interesting. Tell us all about you from the early stages to where you are today.
Sure. I mean, I think my history is nowhere near as extensive as yours or as interesting. But basically, where do I start? Okay, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I mostly work with neurodivergent teens, but I also see young kids and adults, and I provide individual therapy. I really love what I do. And the truth is that, just like you advocate for, I really believe in following your passion. And so now I am also writing my debut book because that is my second passion, writing. Yeah.
And the book that you're writing is, I forgot now the title. It was an interesting title. Give us the title once more, Lily. I talked about it this morning, and all of a sudden pops out of my mind. It's coming out in 26, right?
Yes, so I'm expecting it to come out and to be available in 2026. I'm writing it right now. It's nonfiction, but it's under contract. And it's about the emotional component of ADHD in women, which is just not very well known or recognized or accurately described in the criteria as they appear today in the way that we diagnose ADHD.
Right. Now, but I saw in your bio you talked about ADHD and ASD. Now, for those people that are not familiar with the acronym, and correct me if I'm wrong, ASD, it refers to autism spectrum disorder. Can you explain to us, and I see it not only in your bio, but also in other and deals where the two are combined in a lot of ways, and it's interesting to talk about that, in particular how the two are connected, and what that really means.
Yeah. So, I write ASD because I was trained that way, but I really don't like calling it autism spectrum disorder. Now people are moving more toward calling it like a condition, or, I know Ned Hallowell calls neurodiversity more of like traits, but my heart kind of sinks when I hear that. But yeah, that's the acronym for it, autism spectrum disorder right now. But autism and ADHD are both considered neurodevelopmental disorders or conditions. That's the category that they're under in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Basically, what that means is that they're both brain-based conditions that are inherited and that develop throughout, as you're growing up. So it doesn't kind of come out of nowhere. It's not something that is brought on by trauma. It's genetic and brain-based.
So,
And
so it's
tell me.
usually inherited, you indicate, both as it applies to autism as well as ADHD. And maybe explain a little bit about that. So what you're indicating, that it may well be in genetic, going through either direct or indirectly to family or parents, or correct?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there are ways to study that. And basically, at least for ADHD, I'm not sure what the number is for autism, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was the same or higher. But there's about an 80%, like 80% of the variance of ADHD can be explained by genes. Basically, what that means is that it's mostly genetic.
Right.
Mostly can be explained by genes. And then there are other things that can also contribute to ADHD, make the symptoms worse, or can kind of create ADHD symptoms. But those are much more rare and usually happen in utero.
Okay, and then interesting that you said the disorder, you don't like it, or we don't like it. I don't particularly like it. If I talk about ADHD or ADD in some cases, but more so now ADHD, then I do not like the disorder part of the acronym. I call it a superpower. And so I said, I'm blessed with ADHD.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's such a controversy, like to call ADHD or autism like a gift or a superpower. And so there are people who are strongly against that. And then there are people who are 100% for it. And then there are people who kind of fall in the middle. And in my mind, like, who cares?
Yeah.
Call it whatever you feel comfortable calling it. How?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It took me 50 years to find a book in a bookstore, and you refer to them, here in Prince George, when I was 57 years old, and had lived with ADHD, and and was wondering, how come I'm not the same as everybody else? I knew I was as smart as everybody else. I was very good in reading, very good at numbers, but I sit in a school and I haven't got a clue what they're talking about because I lived in a different world. And I went to a bookstore here in Prince George, actually, and I was then 57, and I picked up a book, and I still don't know even today why I did that. I still have the book, and Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Halliwell. And I opened the book and I said, oh my God, that's me, ADHD. And I wrote in the book in Dutch because I was ashamed of it. Now I finally know who I am in Dutch. But it changed my world, because now all of a sudden I knew in my mind that that was one of the links that had changed my life. And it changed my life from that point forward. But even then, Gilly, it took me 5 years before I went to my doc that delivered our two daughters and was a personal friend of mine. I went to his office and he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." So, and we checked that out, and yes, I do. And by then, I was 62 years old, and I had checked it out on Google and Facebook and whatever I could check it out. And then I become more and more aware that it is very frequent, frequency of occurrence then on Google, when at that point, if I looked at it, was 8% of the population. Obviously, later I found it's much higher than that. It's more than 20% likely. But the interesting about the book is the more I read about it, the more I believed that now I understood that I left for Canada when I was 23 years old. One of the reasons that I did is because I was born in 1940, so I'm going to be 84 this year, and during the war years, and then we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945, and I knew I would go to the land of my heroes, and so I always knew that. So it gave me but then academically in Holland, I was not a success story. I failed grade 3, and I failed grade 7 3 times. And they said, "What are we going to do with this guy?" Now, my parents were beautiful people, but a lot of people said, "Well, send him to the mentally challenged school." But fortunately, they said, "No, we're not going to do that." So they got me into a job or create a skill set that I could use working with my hands. And my dad was in the lumber industry, and my grandfather was a master carpenter. So they sent me to a furniture factory. I was then 13. And kids are hard on each other, you know, so all the friends that I had, that I went to school with in and around our area that I grew up with, all of them went to college and then to university, and I became a laborer. Now, right. I'm proud of that today, but then I wasn't. So I wanted to start from, I wanted to go to the land of my heroes, but it gave me an opportunity to prove to me that I knew just as much as everybody else did. And I had skill sets that I could become successful. So my dream was going to Canada, start with nothing, then prove to me, not to anybody else, to me in a whole new setting, that I could build, which was my second dream, or third dream, that I could build a lumber mill. And I wanted to start with nothing. And so when I came off the plane, and I could speak language, didn't know soul, didn't have a job, and landed in Montreal, took the train across Canada, came to Vancouver, went to the immigration office, and fortunately there was a German fellow, I could speak some German, and I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a lumber mill. Now, British Columbia has lots of timber and lots of mills. He said, "Go to Prince George. It's a boom town. That's where they're building mills, and that's where the opportunities are." Now, while I'm sitting here in our studio downtown Prince George, 60 years later, I can still virtually see the Greyhound station where I arrived with my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. And so, but I did have the attitude, I'm always positive. No matter how tough today is, I know tomorrow is going to be better. No matter what. I avoid negative. And then I have the passion. Whatever I do, I give it 150%. And the other one is work ethic. And I work harder than anybody. Even now at nearly 84, I still get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always think I'm late, and I always make my bed, and I always think, whatever day it is today, there'll be challenges, and I'm going to give it all that I got. And then, obviously, with all the things that I'm doing, I have a number of companies. It's not about my success story, but I do that. And then I'm an author, and I'm a speaker, and podcasting, and all the other things. They say, "How do you do that?" I said, ADHD. That's how I do it.
You're right. Yeah. No, you're right. 100%. You're right. It's just that I think, and this is more, I think, because the research on the superpowers or the benefits of ADHD is very slim. But I think one thing ADHDers have is grittiness and stubbornness. People have always said to me, like, you are so stubborn. Like, once you make a plan, there is no other way. It has to be that way, but you need
Absolutely.
it that way,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So the other part about agility is that I find is that for all those years, 50 years from the time that I was 13 years old, and saying, what are we going to do with him? And the kids were going on holidays in Holland for a month to schools then in grade 7. And so my dad got me, had a friend that had a clothing store, so he opened the door on Sunday for us, so I could buy 3 sets of coveralls that I needed on Monday morning when I go to the furniture factory. And so I still remember that, and they didn't really have any coveralls just because I was small, and I had to roll them up, and the crotch was hanging by my knees. That's modern today, but it wasn't then. And so that's how I want to work. But I was always optimistic, but it still always troubled me. What was happening to me? How come I could not do what the other ones could do? And why? I believe that I could, but a lot of people, they say, nah, he just know, he's just dumb, and all that kind of stuff, right? So, and there's something wrong with them. My parents didn't do that, but other people did, and I always knew that. And then, so by going here to Canada, and then starting anew, and then by pure coincidence, walking into that bookstore and picking up the book from Dr. Halliwell, Driven to Distraction, written by him in 1993. I bought it in 1997, and I still have it today, actually. And then, that changed my world. And then the more I found out about it, the more I was convinced. But up to that point, after even 50 years, Gillian, until I found out, I felt there was something not right about me in a way. I had difficulty interacting with people in a setting that was more than 3 people. I was very successful in business. I had all kinds of different businesses, and everybody said, you're so successful in this, and I didn't feel that way. I still felt I had failed. And so it was not until then that I knew that was the key. And then the more I found out about it, the more I felt that I had an obligation, initially when I started understanding it, to speak out about it. And I did not say it, and I understand that where people say, well, how can you say it's a superpower? I know that, at least from my experience, and I'm not a doc or a psychologist or all of those kinds of things. I'm not. I'm just this individual that lived it. I know that once that happened and I understood, it changed a whole lot of things in my life.
Yeah. You know what, though? I think you said before, I'm not a doc. I'm just an individual who lived it. And honestly, I think there's no better expert. And I think that we give too little credit to people's reports. Like, I've heard, psychologists talk about ADHDers just not being very reliable reporters, or, having a poor memory, or, just kind of basing it more on other people's reports. And I think that's flawed, because I think that we have better intuition and better insight than people think. And I'm sure there's some variability there, but I think we would learn a lot more, especially about anyone who's not a boy, because the criteria are based on mostly boy samples. But I think we would learn a lot more from people if we just opened up a blank page and just asked them about their experience with an open
Exactly.
mind.
Exactly. Now, the interesting part that I found, in all the things that we have done, in podcasting, you are my podcast number 243. And if you have an opportunity, to look at my podcast 203, it's with Dr. Halliwell.
Yes,
and
I've
so
listened to it.
yeah, and so how it went is this way: is that I have a relationship with him because I've been podcasting about ADHD and a whole lot of other stuff. But that's always somehow part of what I do. And he got contact with me. We contacted him, and so him and me had a discussion about my book and the book that he obviously read. He read 5 on the attention deficit area, and then 15 other ones on other issues. He's very, very good. ADHD, obviously a doctorate, and slowly reader, and all of this. And I say, hey, that same for me. I said to him that I believe that from my experience that I initially thought it was 8% of the frequency of occurrence. I said, at least, Doc, in my opinion, it's more than 20%. He said, John, it's 25% or even more. And then the other part
Yes,
that I said,
I agree.
and that's what I said. And the other one, really, from my experience, was successful entrepreneurs, and the operative is successful, and CEOs. That I feel from all the people that I've met, numerous of them, and know a lot of them, that I believe 50%, I said to Dr. Halliwell, I believe are ADHD. He said, no, John, more than 75%. And I agree with them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, so Dr. Kathleen Nadeau. I was listening to a podcast that she was on as a guest, and she was talking about a professor who I think she had, and she described this analogy that I basically use with like everyone now. I just love it. But she said that the way she understands ADHD is the way that everyone's face is different. No one's face is exactly alike. And it's the same thing with our brains. Everyone's brain is unique. No brain is exactly alike. We are all neurodivergent, right? Maybe we can find a way, right, to clump similarities in some way, but I don't think, the world doesn't work like that, where it's so black and white. Like, here are the neurodivergent people, and these are the neurotypical people. I mean, and I think it's helpful also to take a step back and to just look at things from a social psychology lens, and just understand, like, how did we even get to this place with trying to categorize or make sense of the world, or, just the tendency of people to have that fundamental attribution error where they just assume, oh, this person's lazy. It's within human nature to just jump to conclusions and assume it's a character flaw, as opposed to accept that it's probably just a different way of functioning.
The interesting part about, and I agree with you 100%. I do a lot of doing presentations, especially to young people, but people in colleges, universities, and all over this place. And I find that a lot of people are too preoccupied the way they look, the way they dress, all the other things. What I say is that you have to be at peace as to who you are.
Yes.
Every single individual is special in this world. And
Absolutely.
once you accept that, then all the other things that follow with ADHD, if it is or it is not a superpower, that once we start with that everybody is the same, they are unique. If I then become a model and I qualify, I grew up during the war years, was tough times, and saw photographs that we shouldn't have seen, and then were liberated, right. And so ended up with PTSD, Was my mother on her own because my dad didn't know if he lived or died. The bombing of Rotterdam. She had 3 kids. Every morning we would go with gunny sacks in the railroad yard, pick up anything edible and burnable, and grew up in that kind of an environment. And then obviously went through the schooling. That was not a success story. And then, but the interesting part about me as a model would be all of that happened, but that did not cause me to be ADHD. But I was already an optimist then. I was always a happy-go-lucky guy, lived in my own world a lot, and then already was entrepreneurial, selling papers, and I was always the guy that had some money because I did everything to make a few dollars if I could in Holland, and was very industrious. So the other thing that I did, and with the limited amount of schooling, already when I was in the furniture factory working, and if I heard about a successful individual giving a presentation somewhere in Holland, I would go out of my way to go down there and listen to them. I wanted to understand what made them click, what made them so special. And then the other part is I was a good writer, and I was good with numbers, and I still am today. Obviously, I'm working on my 5th book, and so I had these qualities, and and it was not until I kind of unlocked it in my own mind and saying, that's the key, and then from there and in terms of not being right up to the time, 1990, I was successful, but I was not good in speaking or interacting in too many places. And so in my own setting, there's about 3 individuals in my mill, but not beyond that. And then somebody, ex-sister-in-law actually, dragged me to an organization called Toastmasters. And I don't know if you've heard of it. Toastmasters is where they train communication skills. And so it's all over the world pretty much. Comes from the United States primarily. Every city, including this one, has probably 6 Toastmaster clubs where they go and they interact with a group of other people to improve their skills, speaking skills, not only to present, but also become good listeners, and then thinking on your feet and all of those things. And that to me was very helpful. Probably as we speak, probably 450,000 people in North America alone are part of Toastmaster clubs. Around the world, probably up to 10 million people have had involvement in Toastmasters. I stayed with them for 10 years, and which is a long time, and to become a good communicator and understanding it, but also to give myself confidence in addition to ADHD, and became a very good presenter and now in-demand keynote speaker. And that part, by pure coincidence, changed my life. And so, but at an age that I was in Toastmasters from 1990 to 2000, again, I was in my 60s when I started to, my business was successful, where I became as an individual more aware of, ADHD in particular and what it can do, and that had that unique opportunity for people to understand themselves better. I find that probably was my biggest advantage. I knew I was a good writer. I'd been asked by a lot of people, why don't you write a book about your life? It's so interesting. And so I did. It took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. Now, you know as well as I do, writing books is not easy. And so no. I wrote this book against all odds. And that's not about how successful John is. Just the opposite, all the way from up and down and going all the way through it.
Yeah.
And then the other part is that, the interesting part about the book is that when I left Holland, I don't know how familiar you are with Holland, but I was born and lived in the northeastern part of Holland, and we speak a dialect there. And if you speak the dialect, then you have to acquire to speak High Dutch. And so, but I love speaking
Wow.
dialect, so I was never all that good about speaking High Dutch. But then then I had to acquire that. I was in the Air Force actually for 2 years, drafted, and so I didn't speak High Dutch. So I had to acquire to speak High Dutch with my ADHD. Then I went to Canada. Now I had to go from the dialect to High Dutch. Now I barely got that under control. Then I got on the flight and flew to Canada, and I couldn't speak the language here, and I had to kind of acquire that. And all along the way is to build my business. My dream was to, it was not a question, will I not build a mill? I'm going to build a mill. I will build a mill. Within 2 years, I was a superintendent of one of the biggest mills here. And then within 2.5 years, I was part owner of a mill. And today we have 3 or 4 different mills in different places, and we have all kinds of other businesses. And so the point that I'm making, there is no question in my mind, and being the model, here I stand, with my grade 3 and failing, and grade 7 and all the other things. That's formal education. That does not stop somebody being
Absolutely.
educated. So, in the point, in that, to me, is that there is no question in my mind. I'm working on the 4th book that's coming out. Actually, it's coming out in July. It's this one here, Living Young, Dying Old. And that's a picture of me, actually, on the front. I'm also, the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America, I believe. And, and I will be competing in the Arnold. So I was successful bodybuilding here. And there's a story behind that. I'll probably share that with you a little bit later. But it got a shock in my life that that nearly died, and so I became much more serious about diet and exercise, and then felt I had to write a book about it. But the point that I'm making is that it was all of that combination coincidental that I walked into that bookstore, found the book of Dr. Halliwell, then coincidental that my ex-sister-in-law dragged me to Toastmasters, that gave me the confidence of thinking on my feet, becoming a very good speaker and presenter, because I am, and I can say that in myself. And I could not have done that without ADHD. There is no question about that in my mind. So for me, it was through circumstances, understanding who I was, including ADHD. And then I did one more thing. I just want to show you that just for... so then I felt so strongly about ADHD that I felt I had to write a book about that. So I did that one too, ADHD Unlocked. And, so the combination of all of that is that I believe that, and that's why I'm vocal about it, that's why I admire you for the things that you're doing and have done, and all the things that you're doing today, the book that you're writing. In particular, an observation from me is that it was not well understood. They always thought, I believe, that ADHD was mainly the males. That is to a certain extent the case, but females probably are equally so, but they display it differently than males do,
Yeah. Another analogy that I really like is that comparing females to males with ADHD is like comparing apples and oranges.
Right.
We're better off comparing women with versus women without ADHD to see really what the differences are, because it can surface so differently. But one thing I was thinking is you're very fortunate to have stumbled just coincidentally upon Ned Hallowell's book, because that's a good one. It could have been any book on ADHD, and you just landed on, one of really the experts in the field, in addition to John Rady. So, I think, I don't know, I believe in coincidences, but also I think that, things happen for a helpful reason generally.
Exactly.
in
Yeah,
life. Like, we have purpose. And from what I'm hearing from your story, is that you take your experiences and you turn them into something that's meaningful. Like, the
exactly.
Canadians came in, they helped you, they saved you. You said, one day I'm going to move to Canada. And you did
Exactly.
it. You
Yes,
know, this book helped you. You said, I'm going to publish,
exactly.
because books can really make that big of a difference in people's
Exactly.
lives. And I think that's beautiful. And it's a great message to send to people that, and I think that it's so built into ADHD too. Like, I think the optimism and the positivity is important, but I describe ADHDers as just walking roller coasters. Like, we crash and then we pick ourselves back up.
Yeah.
But that's just how we are. And I think that's what makes us like stubborn and special and the way that we are and resilient.
And the other thing, Lily, that I find is that I did a presentation, I don't know, a year and a half ago, so to about 40 business people that, the all in their 40s or something along those lines. And, they had three speakers. They wanted them to speak about the lumber industry, and I'm lumber manufacturer, so they had me there. I was the closing speaker. And I said, no, I'm not going to talk about forest industry. All these other guys already did. So let's talk about something different here, about writing books in particular as it relates to
Yes.
ADHD. So I talked to them about that. And during the time that I made the presentation, there was three individuals that put up the finger and say, I'm ADHD. And there were a couple of them that said, I've never told anybody that. And that has been an experience that I've had numerous times. I love giving presentations live, but it takes a lot of times, because if I go someplace in the States or in Canada and other places, it usually takes at least a couple of days. And I love to do that, but I don't do it as much as I would like to do it. I did one presentation where by the time I'm done presenting, and I do it with the benefit of Toastmasters, I'm a good speaker with passion, and if I talk about in particular ADHD, by the time I'm done, there are several people in the room that have it, probably 20% of them at least, and have had a touch of it. Then I get to the point that I say, darn, I wish I had it too. And that has happened over and
Yeah.
over again.
I think there is something just very liberating and comforting when you have someone who you view as an authority or as someone who's successful, and they say to you, hey, I'm ADHD. Like, a lot of the families that I work with, where the parents worry about telling their kid about their ADHD or their autism. Like, what if, other kids make fun of them? What if it affects their self-esteem? And they ask me, how should I frame this when I talk to my kid? I tell them, well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Chances are you've got traits, and a lot of them agree. It's
Exactly.
just that they haven't gotten diagnosed. So your kids love you. They look up to you. Explain it to them like, I wear glasses, you wear glasses, I have ADHD, and so do you.
Yeah, so yeah,
Right?
and look at it not as a liability. It's not,
Right. It just
the
is. Yeah.
yeah, and make it work for you, because there is success stories all over the world, and we find out more and more of them. And I believe that's why it is so important, like for people like you and like myself, like many others that are becoming much more vocal about it, and sharing with them, the better knowledge about it, and also in the learning institutions and all of those kind of things, that they're starting to adapt more towards different learning styles or abilities that individuals have, and accommodating them.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it really is. It was saddening to me to think that you were held back so many years. Like, why would that help any child? If it didn't work out for you the first year, the second year probably won't be any different if it's exactly like the previous year. And then a third time, I mean, it makes no sense. If anything, I think you were disadvantaged. It was not your fault by any means. It's just the way, the structure of school systems, they're just very rigid.
So the interesting part about it, Gilly, is that sometimes I talk about it in presentations that I give. I have reconciled it a long time ago already in my mind. So it's now more, for example, for me, and to speaking about it and encouraging others and give them, the ability to say, okay, yeah, that is interesting. So I've had the question doing Q&As and saying that, do you feel still now very bad about failing grades 3 and then failing grade 7 3 times? I said, yeah, it still really, really bothers me, actually. I should have left much earlier.
You're right.
And so that usually, but I'm serious about it, as you were, as saying that
you're right.
If the first thing you did, second time, third time, what's the purpose,
Right.
And the other part is when I was writing this book, and I'm going to send you a copy of all my books. I'm going to sign them for you, and so this one here, ADHD Unlocked. By pure coincidence, I was sitting in a plane next to somebody between Vancouver and Victoria. We have a place in Victoria, and a fellow by the name of Tom Romer, and he said to me, "Hey, you remember I sat next to you about a year ago?" And I said, "I kind of remember. I don't know exactly." He said, "I'm Tom Romer. I'm the Vice President of Academics for the British Columbia Institute of Technology." And I said, "Okay, yes." And he said, "You were writing a book about," I said, "Against All Odds." He said, "Yeah, how's your book?" And I said, "Well, it's done." I said, "I'm writing another one, though, and that is ADHD Unlocked." He said, "Interesting." And he said, VR and the British, BCTS, we are working on a concept of micro-certification, saying that the learning model of a skill sets to focus on that and the additional things that we want them to acquire on the outside of the initial skill set. That would do a number of things for people, because I'm very good at things if I'm interested in. I have hyper focus, right? And so that would work for me. And then the other things, once and the skill set that I want to develop, then it makes it much easier to. And so that becoming more and more the case. Last week I had a conference with the president of the University of Northern British Columbia, and again they're doing the same. They're looking at all of those. So I've had the opportunity to talk to some of the major institutions here in Western Canada and about that. And then the other part, Gilly, that I find amazing is you have done the same. You're a public speaker, obviously very successful. I find podcasting is an amazing platform, because while you and me are sitting here having dialogue at these very, very important issues that a lot of people around the world are looking for information and feedback, is there we are sitting here having the discussion, and we know already that tens of thousands of people will be watching our discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, as an ADHDer, especially when I was just thinking of the ideas for my book, I 100% prioritized podcasts and getting an audio version because that's what we do. Driving, listening to a podcast, doing house chores, listening to something, just absorbing information constantly about the thing that you're very passionate about. And, podcasts are just a really great way to disseminate information in a very relatable and casual way. We don't want to feel stressed out.
And it's still at its beginning, right? So it's still on its infancy, really, if you look at it, because, like pre-COVID, I was doing blogging 5, 6 years ago, and then started to form a podcasting in the region here of a local television station. And that worked well in the region. But then from there and then COVID came and they closed it down. And then we said, what should we do now? I had this beautiful apartment here that I had bought as an investment, and say, well, let's create a studio here. And then, we'll podcast from here, but still not thinking virtual until I was thinking about, I said, well, I have an apartment in Vancouver. Maybe we can do a studio there as well. And then the more we thought about it, is that virtual, I look at all the US televisions and Canadian ones, virtual now is flawless virtually. There you are sitting in Atlanta, CNN, and then I'm sitting in central British Columbia, and it feels to me that we have this relationship, and it feels like we are sitting here together, you and me, having these amazing discussions about things that are so important around the world, because and so
It's
unique.
true.
It's an amazing vehicle, and only at the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sitting against the pillow over there that says, what is it, The Good Life?
The good life.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where I'm sitting.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a holographic version of me.
Yeah, so and it feels that way, because and it's amazing, and obviously, you're doing the same, and it's becoming more and more. Just today, I had an amazing discussion with, and somebody that's a doctorate also in the same field as you have, from Brisbane, Australia.
I love that. That is so cool.
Unbelievable. And that was just today. You
Yes.
remember 243, that was 242. Very, very interesting and very, very amazing. And, so, and as you have done, you have had people from Peru, from Japan, from Sweden, from Central Europe, all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's amazing. And honestly, I got off social media for several years because of rejection sensitivity. I didn't, I couldn't handle it. But then I got back on when I started on my book journey. And I think the most rewarding part of it has been connecting with other professionals in other states and other countries. And, it's like you think, oh, you make friends, but it's not just friends. Like, you're really collaborating with them and making a positive impact in your field.
Yeah, I saw that in your bio. You stepped away from it for about 7 years. And then now again, you're very active on the social media. But then when you stepped away from it, I would think that was 2016, 2017. We didn't have this, what we have today. Everything has changed a lot,
Yes, yes, yes. And it felt like a lot. There was definitely a learning curve. I mean, I was telling people I kind of feel like I was placed in a time capsule because when I opened TikTok for the first time, it was like, whoa, so many reels, or whatever they call it, back to back. And, I didn't know any of the terminology. I still kind of found, pretty old fashioned. But honestly, you don't really need social media to communicate with others or to maintain relationships or to live a positive life. If anything, there's some work out there showing that social media can make you extremely unhappy, and it's not necessarily a positive thing. But for people who are trying to get a message out there, It's necessary because if you just go against the grain and you hide like a hermit, like I did, it's, you're not going to get the message out. So you have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, I like, I'm not overly active. I do Facebook to a certain extent, not many of the other ones, but podcasting to me has become an amazing vehicle. Since I started with it 2 years ago, really, and virtual in particular, and then Podmatch was a good vehicle for us to be involved with, and and it's just growing and growing, and makes it very interesting. Now, the other part that I noticed about you is the book. What was the title again of the book? You had a very interesting.
So it's Allow Me to Interrupt.
Yeah. Oh, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Allow me to interrupt. I thought a very interesting title. So how did you? Where did it come from? The title.
I came up with it.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just, yeah. I mean, I talked it over with my literary agent. Originally, I had a different title. And she said, for me, and I just made a reel about this actually, like when you're very interested in something, you can get lost and your audience needs to understand what you're talking about.
Exactly.
So my title wasn't clear enough. So then I thought, well, what has a little bit of a bite to it?
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to give that flair, in my book, and then also give women the space to just embrace that characteristic of themselves. Like, just be okay with the fact that you're outspoken. Like,
Exactly.
you're not a shrew, right? Like from the Taming of the Shrew. You are
Exactly.
successful and you deserve to speak up.
Exactly.
And so that's why, I have Allow Me to Interrupt.
Yeah, I like it. It's very original. It's something obviously that I've thought about a lot in terms of the books that I did. The title is so important. The cover is so important to get attention. And now the other thing that you do, you're also writing a lot and different medias. And so tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So again, this is all about just kind of getting my message out there. And while here's the thing that I love, John, and I'm sure you can understand what I'm talking about and relate to this too. But people are constantly growing. And when I'm doing these things, it's really just an opportunity to, it's not just altruistic. Yes, I'm giving to others, but also I'm learning so much along the
Exactly.
way. I am just absorbing information and then I can relay it to others. And in the process of contributing to magazines and blogging for ADDitude Magazine, I don't know why I just said that. But one thing I've learned that's pretty scary and surprising is that just in healthcare, the research looking at sex differences, or even just including females, it's just there are problems with that. Because like I was doing research on a couple different areas, like on migraine, on ADHD, and just in general, like looking at, neuroscience research. And although we've moved in a direction of including, or trying to at least include, an equal number of females as males in research, they're not really going the second step and testing for differences between the two, which is a mistake. Because if you're looking for the effectiveness of a drug or a type of treatment, and you're saying, oh, it's effective, and then you're not looking and comparing, the apples and the oranges, at least, then you're jumping to conclusions and you could be doing more harm than good.
Right.
And we're seeing that in a lot of different areas. And I just don't know, I don't understand how many mistakes we need to run into before there starts to be more change. And more, I guess, like consequences for not following through with those mandates.
Yeah. I find little, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of ADHD and understanding those in the same as the autism spectrum disorder. We don't like disorder, but that all of that, relatively speaking, is all new in terms of, if I look back 3, 4, 5 years from back, most people wouldn't even understand what it is.
Right.
Neither did I
Yeah.
initially. ADHD, I have no idea what it is until I picked up that book in 1997. So, but before we start talking about it, I'm building businesses. I have a lumber mill. I'm planning to expand, hypothetically speaking, but I've done that many times. I'm buying a business plan. I'm negotiating with lenders, and and then in the negotiations, part of it is get to know the principal. Obviously, I'm 100% owner of all my companies, and I have close to 10 of them, and and then they say, okay, well, does he have any health issues, and blah blah blah, and all of
Oh,
that
yeah.
is being looked at, right? And saying, yeah,
Yeah.
I have a mental disorder. Oh, well, have a nice day then. So not now, because
I would
I'm
hate
still
that.
dealing with all the banks, and everybody's watching my podcast,
Yeah.
and be and so and not bragging about it, but to show how powerful this media is, that I'm sitting in, I'm laying out my whole life in front of everybody, and I
Right.
love it because it will help others maybe that are struggling with it. And at the same time, my bankers are watching it. I negotiated yesterday with a couple of key bankers that we are dealing with, and they probably will watch this today, maybe. And they said, yeah, I've been watching. I knew the podcast that you did was this person and that person and the other person. I said, oh my God, can you believe it? So in the last 2 years, I think we have had 20 million views on our podcast, and I think on YouTube, well, we are passing 100,000 or so. The power of podcasting, that's the point that I'm making. Not how popular John, it's not about that. But the power of podcasting is just at the very beginning. And I believe that this podcasting is already more popular than a lot of the news media that we get now, as well as some of the television main stations that we see now. And a lot of people that I know, you say, no, I've always looking at podcasting. I look at this podcast, look at that podcast. And it is becoming exactly that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yes. And I think it takes a lot of courage it does. It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and to talk about aspects of yourself that are stigmatized. For example, I made a reel the other day talking about being Jewish and being Israeli, and just kind of saying, like, I'm very proud of that. And I was waiting to see what kind of a reaction will I get. So I lost a ton of followers.
Oh,
And
no.
then I had, yes, and then I had someone who was Jewish who commented something very nice. And she basically was talking about her experience with feeling like she had to hide being Jewish. And then I responded to her, and then she deleted the comment. So I messaged her and I said, what happened? Like, your comment disappeared. So she said, I felt unsafe. She didn't even feel safe commenting on her reel that I made where I said that I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
It's so scary and sad, but it really takes a lot of bravery.
So, Julie, I grew up in 19 1940. I was born in 1940 in northeastern Holland. It was invaded by a dictator called Adolf Hitler, and so I love democratic. Yeah, no kidding. Eh? And so I still remember in our little city where people were dragged out of their houses, to work there, and Jewish families, they were dragged out of their houses, never to return. And so we knew that. And then, so what I always say, and I've been very vocal about it, is that we are so fortunate in North America, both the US and Canada, that we have democratic rule, and then to those people that believe, and I believe there are people that do believe that wars are, there is a war, and then when the war is over, everything goes back to normal. That simply does not happen. I lived it. I can speak to it. We had a dictator of the worst kind, Adolf Hitler, that had our under control, and it affected our family for the rest, not only one generation, but others that follow. And if I look around the world now, that due to Ukraine and a troubled Middle East, that no one of all the different directions or groups or beliefs or whatever they are, no one wants war. Everybody wants to live in peace. But unfortunately, we have situations like Ukraine, Russia, and Middle East situations that are very challenging and very difficult. For us here, we can make ourselves lucky, because if now, and I watch the U.S. Government or the elections and all those kind of things, but some people think that dictatorship is maybe the direction to go. Well, go to Russia, go to North Korea, go to the Iran, go to Venezuela, go to Cuba, and experience the dictatorships of where there is no compassion for anything or anybody, and it's destructive on everybody, and that's the way it is. And so that there's we are very lucky to be here. I'm not sure if everybody realizes that. And then for all the young people, and for all the young people, and including the ones that are benefiting from, I call it ADHD, but that everybody is special and unique, and then give back to your community and be part of the culture, and share with others the benefits that we have, so that without precondition or without prejudgment of individuals, respect everybody, and I believe that's very important.
Absolutely, yes. I think if there's a title to this episode or a theme, it should be "Love Yourself, Just Be You."
Exactly. Lily, it was a privilege to have you on my podcast. We covered a lot of stuff, good stuff, and if you got a contact point that you want to mention, that people want to contact you?
Sure, yeah. So my website is Dr. Gilly Kahn, GILLYKAHN.com, and my Instagram handle is Dr. Gilly Kahn. So not so hard to remember. But yeah, you can find me in either location.
Excellent, Julie. Let's make sure we stay in touch, and we'll make sure we send you. I'm going to sign the books, and we'll send them out to you. And this will be released tomorrow morning.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much, John.
Excellent. Thanks, Julie. Take care.